Have you ever stopped to think about how an entire continent, like Europe, actually keeps the lights on? I mean, it's a huge, complicated question, right? Well, today, that's exactly what we're going to unpack. Europe's surprisingly diverse energy map.
So let's just get right to it. You might think there's, one main way Europe gets its power. Like, is it all solar or maybe it's all nuclear? Well, the answer is not even close. And honestly, the reality is way more interesting than that.
Okay, so first up, let's look at the power of the elements themselves. We're talking about renewables that are literally driven by nature. Think water and wind. They're some of the oldest power sources we've ever used, but they're also at the cutting edge of modern energy.
For a pretty big chunk of countries, the answer to their energy problem comes from something simple: flowing water. Yep, hydropower. It's basically king in any place lucky enough to have lots of mountains and big, powerful rivers.
And if you look at the list, you can totally see a pattern, right? You've got your Nordic giants like Iceland, Norway, and Sweden. Then there's Austria, right in the heart of the Alps, and a bunch of Balkan nations too. It's a perfect example of how a country's geography pretty much dictates its energy choices.
All right, so from the power of flowing water, let's switch over to blowing wind. For a whole other group of countries, it's not about the rivers. It's all about harnessing those strong, steady breezes that blow across their land.
So, who are the big players here? Well, you've got Denmark, which is basically a legend in wind turbine tech, but also Lithuania and Spain. These are the countries that have gone all in on wind, making it their #1 source. It just goes to show you there's more than one way to do renewable energy.
Okay, get ready, because we're about to make a huge shift. We're going from the raw power of nature to the incredible power that's locked deep inside the atom. That's right, we're diving into the world of nuclear energy, a source that's unbelievably powerful, but also, super controversial.
You gotta love this quote. Back in 1933, Ernest Rutherford, one of the guys who literally pioneered nuclear physics, said getting power from atoms was moonshine, basically a crazy fantasy. Fast forward less than 100 years, and it's the main power source for some of Europe's biggest economies. It's just wild how fast things can change.
And take a look at this, it really shows you where nuclear is king. You can see these two clear groups, or blocks. Over in the west, you've got France, which is the absolute heavyweight of nuclear power, plus Belgium and Switzerland. Then, over in the east, you've got this cluster of countries like Slovakia, Slovenia, Hungary, and Ukraine that are also all in on nuclear.
All right, on to our final category, and it's a big one: fossil fuels. With all the talk about renewables, it's easy to forget that for the largest number of countries in Europe, the power grid still runs on coal, gas, and oil. They are still the bedrock.
Let's start with coal. And you might be surprised by how many major economies still depend on it. We're talking 3 industrial powerhouses plus most of an entire region. So who are we talking about?
Well, you've got economic giants like Germany, industrial centers like Poland, and another major player, Turkey. And on top of that, you have most of the Balkan nations. For this huge group of countries, coal isn't some relic of the past. It's the foundation of their energy supply right here, right now.
Okay, next up is natural gas, which, a bit cleaner than coal. And for this one, there's a key trio of countries in Western Europe that have made it their main go-to source.
And that trio? It's the United Kingdom, Italy, and the Netherlands. It's really interesting, isn't it? You've got these big, developed economies that have formed their own little gas block, completely separate from the countries relying on coal or nuclear.
And that brings us to our last fossil fuel: oil. When it comes to being the primary source of electricity, the map narrows, and narrows all the way down to just one single country, a total outlier on the entire continent.
And that lone country is Cyprus. It makes sense when you think about it. As an island, its energy situation is totally unique, which is why it's the only place in Europe that relies mainly on oil to keep the lights on. It's a really cool piece of this whole energy puzzle. Wow, okay, so we've been all over the map, haven't we? From the rivers of Norway to the coal fields of Poland, from Danish wind farms to French nuclear plants. Let's step back for a second and put all these pieces together.
So what's the big takeaway here? I think it's that it's really easy to just say Europe and think it's all one thing with one energy plan. But that's not the reality at all. The truth is, it's a huge, complex patchwork. Every single country's main power source is a story of its own unique geography, its history, and the economic path it's chosen. And that really leaves us with one big, final question to think about. As everyone keeps pushing to get away from carbon,
What is this energy map going to look like in the future? Which of these countries are going to shift? What's going to become the new #1 power source? That, right there, is the big story to watch.